Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I shall keep doing these repotting videos till everybody gets fed up and stops watching them. What it is every time I water my pots, which is quite infrequent, I've just had a 9-day gap, and even then some of these pots were still wet. None of these have been watered, but as I go around the pots I'm looking for things that I'd be pushing my luck leaving them till spring or until new growths form or whatever, because the media just looks iffy, and in some cases I do know that the plants have been in there a long time. So this is a something and I say that because it's not in my records and I don't know what it is. Some sort of oncidium thing, could be a Miltonia, but it was shoved in a little pot to try and generate some roots, which it's sort of done. But it's got moss in the pot and I'm trying to slowly but surely, oh that really smells, eradicate the moss because of that very thing. But what we've got here is a little growth and another new one just starting, which means there'll be some roots very soon. In fact, that might even be the first one. But sheaths off, give the roots a chance to go. And then over here, this last little new growth is highly likely to push another one out very soon. So it's a matter of getting the sheaths out of the way, give it a chance. And I'll just rinse the rest of this old media out under the tap, because these roots aren't bad. I mean, there are some growing tips here. It's just a matter of getting all the moss out and getting it in some new media, really. So we'll give that a rinse under the tap. As I said, I haven't got a clue what it is, and the fact that the forward part of the plant now is growing reasonably well, I will take this back part of the rhizome off. It's got a leafless bulb and an extension here that's just going to get in the way in the pot, so I'll have that off with the big cutters, the secateurs. Damage my little scissors. Right, so that's one. And then here we have the challenge plant, which I can't remember the name of, and it hasn't got a tag because I know what it is in my notes. I just haven't memorised the name yet. It's got a strange name. Now we've had this out of the pot several times to just check what's going on in the pot, and what's going on is some root growth and a good root system. And it looks like it's got bark up in the middle, but I'm classing this, I'm handling this as though it was a zygopetalum, so with extreme caution as far as the root system is concerned. Now what I hadn't noticed while this has been doing its thing with its blooms is it has actually pushed up a little growth, but I don't know whether that was a weak growth that was there before and I'm just imagining it. But this new growth here, I'll see how close I can get, has got a new root coming out, so it's just coming into root growth, so now's a good time to get at it. The spike came off today, the last flower wilted. So what we've got here is a plant in moss, and yet there's bark in the bottom here, which is weird. So that was probably the crocking in the pot, but it doesn't look like there's any roots in the centre at all, which is good, because hopefully that means there's no dead ones. But all I'm going to do with this one is try and get as much of the old moss out under the tap as I can. It feels like it's loose in the middle, it should come out. And then obviously there's hardly any moss around the outside. The roots have gone down the outside of the moss. There is a little bit to sort of hook out, but probably do a better job with that under the tap. Yeah, there's going to be a hole there if I pick at that. That's the back of the plant, yeah? So we won't have active roots there. So I should be able to pick my way into the centre and get the tap in there and flush that. And we'll see where we go from there. And quite honestly, I'm probably going to leave that live moss on the top. It looks quite nice. But yeah, we've got some actively growing roots. We have a good root system. It's not going back in moss, it's going in something else, so it's going to have a shock. Dramatic change of media. When you get a plant like that that's got almost pure white roots and it's been growing in moss, chances are it's not going to be happy if it goes in something else. So it's going to, there will be an element of stalling, I suspect. But hopefully, with new roots just starting, it won't be too bad. And that's that one. Now, a long time ago in the dim and distant past, I had quite a nice Miltonia sunset, and some of the bulbs started to rot. So I took the 2 leads off and cut all the back of the plant off, the manky bit, and just stuck those 2 leads in some moss and staked them in place in the hope that it might grow some roots, because it didn't really have a good root system at all. Well, it's done that, but that was some time ago. And as we all know, if it was some time ago, then the moss that I put in there is probably gone. It is 2 plants. It's still 2 plants. Wouldn't expect them to magically grow back together. And we do have a root system on both. A little bit of old moss to just take out. I mean, this was only put in loose moss, so that'll just fall out. So that's good. So there's no root damage. And I will probably pot them up in the same pot again, because again I don't want 2. But this is the thing, on this new growth we have a mass of new roots now, and the old roots aren't dead. These are still okay. So we've got roots. Hang on, I have to not get these in the muddle. And then the other piece, what have we got here then? What we've got here is again, we've got some new roots, so it's just coming into root growth now, and the old moss will just fall off because it was never packed in tight. It was just loose. It was, the plants were just sort of placed in there and staked to hold them still. So there we go. There's two quite nice little plants there. Find something for them to grow in. Both got new growth, so they should pull on. And if they go in the same pot, whether they will attempt to bloom on these. I mean, what you've effectively got is an old pseudo bulb that's slightly shriveled but still got its leaves, and then the one that it grew in this pot, that would have been the little tiny new growth when it was potted up. That's matured, larger than the previous one, no shriveling, and still has its leaves, and it now has another new growth coming. So potentially it could attempt to bloom on this new growth, and I probably won't let it. I'd rather get some strength back in the plant and have 3 consecutive healthy bulbs. Yeah? Then it will grow on with vigour rather than just about making it, which is the problem. Let things flower too soon and it takes all the strength out of them. And doesn't leave much to push the next growth on. Same with this one, it's in exactly the same boat. Slightly shriveled older bulb, not quite as well, it's still got its leaves. One that matured, that was the new growth when it was repotted, no shriveling at all with its leaves, and new growth with new roots. So they're both identical, which is good because that's how they were put in there in the first place. I don't reuse these. These have got no coating or anything on them. They're just what do you call it? Kebab sticks or something like that, you know, for putting food on and putting in the grill. One-off use under normal circumstances, and they rot incredibly quickly. So I don't ever attempt to reuse them. They just go in the bin with the other stuff. So that's what we've got. I will now have a wash under the tap, clean all the old stuff off. While I'm doing that, the thinking cap will be on as to what I'm going to pop them in, and I'll be back to pot them up. You can stay with the video if you want to see the repotting, which will be deciding pot size and type and media. Yeah, so there is a decision making process, and then we'll get them in their pots, and well, in 2 cases we can get some labels done, but not in the other one because I don't know what the hell it is. I really don't know. I've got a feeling it's a Miltonia, but I don't know. If it's ever bloomed for me, I will have a picture. So if it ever blooms again, I can compare against my picture, then I'll know what it is. It's like the Tulumnias, they're in the same boat, no tags. Right, I'll be back. Right, we're back. We've got some Burnham's bark. We've got some coconut husk chopped up very small and into soak. If you put that dry, in with dry bark and dry other ingredients, it can be quite difficult to wet, and then it doesn't do its job. So that's a pre-soak. I've got some charcoal, I've got some sponge rock, giant perlite. Those of you who got involved with possibly trying to replace that when I run out, can't be got here, so it's going to have to come from foreign climes. And I think what I'm going to do, it was actually suggested by somebody that I at least look into it. There are things called grow stones or pumice, which seem to be incredibly similar, and I can get those here, and in the media they perform the same role. It's got air in it, so there are tiny little air pockets, rough surface, so provide some drainage, provide some air, and hold some moisture. So effectively, but the bonus with the grow stones and the pumice is they are actually rock. So they've got weight to them, so they can help stabilise pots, whereas this stuff does nothing. It weighs nothing. So, you know, if it was on the top of the pot outside, the wind would blow it away. Right, so where are we then? This is my first one. Now I'm pleased with this. I took off no roots. You know, there may be an odd one here that's dead, but I'm not messing because I don't want to damage the good ones. So a few round the edge. But in the main, that's not a bad root system, this side here, and I've got new roots just starting. And I decided to leave a bit of that moss on the surface. On the grounds it'll grow. Saves me putting any on there. So that's, I believe, best suited to the coconut husk, which is why I got some. Because it looks, the root system looks very zygopetalum like. It looks like the sort of root system that's not going to like drying out. It's going to need some air around it, but not vast quantities, so not like chunky bark or anything. So that's what it's getting. Now it's a matter of finding a pot. That's probably too squashed up. I don't know though. Trouble is, the next one up is sort of that big. Actually, that looks better. We'll have that. It's got an air cone in it, so I think that will be okay. So I'm going to put some bark in the bottom, just around the air cone basically, and then it's just going to get the coconut husk. We'll see how it does. But I'm going to have to get some up in the middle of the plant before I put it in the pot, and just hope it'll stay there, because there's a gigantic hollow in the centre of the plant, which will be very difficult. See, now with roots that aren't brittle, where you can do a bit of pushing and shoving in the pot, that hole would easily be filled up by pushing the media down, and it would come in from the sides. But when you've got delicate roots that are liable to break quite easily, that function can do quite a bit of damage just trying to fill an air gap. And this doesn't look like the sort of root system that wants an air gap, quite honestly. Right, I'm just going to put a little bit down there, and then that is the back of the plant in effect. So we'll get that pushed back, and then that leaves the rest of this to just get this down the sides. Again, no squashing, just gently easing into position really. You can feel it as you do it. You can feel whether you get to know I'm pushing too hard. Just ease off a bit. You get to know that feeling of how much you're pushing on the roots. I've got a gaggle of screaming gulls outside. I don't know what they're screaming about. Perhaps they've been watching a horror film or something. But we are quite close to the coast, and you get this time of year, after all the nesting's finished, you've got the young birds and the parents form quite large flocks, and they move twice a day. They come inland in the evening to find fresh water, you know, to have a little splash and a drink and settle down for the night. and then at first light they head back down to the feeding grounds along the coast, you know, where they've got the mud flats and things like that, where their food source is. Now, I haven't got enough of this. I want the media higher, otherwise the roots are going to miss it. So I was going to top it up with bark, but I think that might defeat the object, so I'll have to put a little bit more into soak. And what I did with this was I cut up the big bits. So this time I'm just going to take them out because it's too fiddly and I don't want the wait too long. So this is just a matter of getting this wet. There's no giant pieces in here, it's all quite small, and this is just to go around the top of the pot because I need those new roots to get into something. It's no good those going aerial. So this is just quite fibrous, and it'll just sit on top of the pot and give those roots some moisture when they come out, which will encourage them to grow, and then they'll get down into the media as they grow. It will stop them going aerial as well, because the moisture will be right next to them, just below them, so they will automatically head downwards. Right, so that's that. New roots just starting. Obviously no need to water that in. It's not very stable, but I'm going to rely on these roots getting going reasonably quick. Now I've got a horrible air gap down the bottom there, but I'm going to have to lump it, because if I try and push down from up here to fill that air gap, I'll crush roots. And I'd rather have a bit of an air gap and live roots than squashed broken roots in the pot. So hopefully this can stay in its pot for a while now. Right, there we go. That's that one done. I'll get a label done for that because I just cannot remember what that thing's called. It's got two words to it, the actual genus and the species, that just don't stick with me. They're just unusual words, so they're not doing very well with me at the moment as regards learning them. So we'll get a label on it and that'll do the job. Right, so now this one, I need to take that back end off, because it'll only get in the way of potting it, and it just as well come off, quite honestly. And there's a very strange little growth there that can come off with it. That'll leave me a nice flat rhizome ready to go. Oh goody. Right, so this is gonna just empty this water out. Loads of water off of the cocoa husk. As these are wet, I don't want to put them back in the bag, so I'll just mix these in. Even though I wasn't planning on having any of this in this mix. Oh, that's a tough one. Then the next one will just fall apart. The variety in the size of these pieces and the way some of them are soft, and some of them are rock hard. Some of them, if you think about it, some of them still actually got the shell rather than the fibrous stuff that's inside that shell. Some of the actual shell is still in here. Right, so this is it's either a Miltonia, it's an Oncidium Alliance, and as far as I'm concerned that can have a standard type mix, which is bark. It could be bark on its own, but we'll have some charcoal with it. That's my game at the moment. As I said, I don't really know if it does any good or any harm, but I haven't heard anybody yet say that they've used charcoal and it did some harm or it caused problems. They either say nothing or they tend to say it does good stuff, makes the media last longer. And then we'll put a bit of sponge rock in while I've got some, and then I'm going to look out for these grow stones. My friend Peter White, that I normally get those sort of supplies from, I don't think he's buying anything at the moment because he likes to go and get stuff to sell on his website. You know, he takes his van across onto the continent and stuff, and obviously those sort of movements are a bit frowned on at the moment. So it's our first day out of lockdown today. what difference has it made to me? Absolutely none, because I wasn't going out anyway. It's made no difference to me whatsoever. But I do have to go out tomorrow because I couldn't get a home delivery for my food shopping, so I've got to go and get it. But I've had it put together in bags ready for collection, because I really don't fancy wandering around big supermarkets full of people not behaving themselves, so we won't do it. I'll do that, I'll give it a bit of room. If I go down to the next one down, that's just going to be too small, I think. That's the next one down. I mean, it would fit in there, but it's got a new growth coming out this end and that end, so they'll be up against the pot very quickly. Yeah, we'll go in the next one up, so you can go in there. It's not a big root system on this, but it's plenty good enough for the size of the plant, and as it's got new ones sort of coming, that'll be fine. On reflection, I'm quite pleased with this size bark, because you know, it was sold as medium, and when I got it home and I had a good look at it, I thought it's closer to small than it is medium compared with the Orchiata. But the Orchiata small seems to break down pretty quickly, and the medium is quite a bit bigger. This is in between the two, so quite honestly it's just the job. It's better than the stuff I've been using for the last I don't know how many years. I like this size, especially for things like this that have got new roots just coming out. So I quite like this size, and we'll see how it goes over the time. You know, time will tell and all that sort of stuff. You're not very secure, are you? I'll be back. I need to stake that. That's far too wobbly. Right, I've just realised that's the sort of point where I usually mess up the camera. It's a very rare event, but I have done it a couple of times where I've had a break, come back and not pressed the button properly, or double pressed it and effectively turned it off and turned it on and straight off again, and that ends up with part of what I wanted to film just not there. Now all I'm doing with this is I'm putting a stake either side of the large bulb, hoping that it'll get a grip in the media, like that. And then clip them. Just get a grabby clip and clip them together. And providing they're reasonably secure in the media, they've got the plant. So no tying and messing about. And they're semi-permanent, I mean they can sit there for a reasonable amount of time. Right, so that one will need a good watering, and hello cat. He's been sat out there in the drizzle, that drizzly fine rain, and he keeps sort of looking around as if to say there's something not quite right, but because it's not actually rain he can hear, he's just sat in it. I bet he's wet now. He's gone in to steal my chair while I'm not in it. Little tyke. Right, so now we've got the two Miltoniopsis, sorry, Miltonias. These are Miltonia sunsets, I do know what these are. These would make two nice little plants actually. But then I don't know, I can't be doing with posting orchids this time of year with the cold. I mean we've got snow threatened, so they are going to go in one pot with the two new growths on the outside, and they can go in a reasonable sized pot because they're just about to generate a brand new root system. And this plant, believe it or not, produces a hell of a size root system. If it gets a hold, it just goes mad, because it's a branching root system as well. So again, normal Oncidium alliance, nothing special. So my mix for that type of plant that needs to stay moist for a bit, but certainly now, you know, in the short days and cooler temperatures, it's not growing at a phenomenal rate, it's growing slowly if at all, those types of plants, and I don't want them staying wet too long, but I need them to stay slightly moist for quite a while. And then come next year, the media is good enough to actually you know, hold a lot of moisture by being watered a bit more frequently. So that's my idea with that. Right, so we'll go in a slightly shorter. All these pots have come from bought plants. They're not pots I've bought. You know, they're pots that plants have come out of. That's why they're all different shapes and sizes. So I get a stack of pots and yet they all look the same and they're not. Some of them are like ½ an inch difference in the height. So they can be quite different. But this is a good little root system, considering it's been unattended for a long time. You know, I mean, literally it was just the 2 bits of plant were just stuck in the smallest pot possible and staked to stop them wobbling in moss, in damp moss, and then it's just got stuck in a black pot and watered along with anything else and just forgotten for some considerable time really. Haven't taken any notice of it. Be very careful of new roots when they're sticking out like that. As you poke down the side, they are so easily snapped off. And if you lose a root tip on a root that's that short, it won't grow. Now if it was 1 inch long and it lost its root tip, it might branch out. You might be lucky and you might save it. It'd be better not to break it in the first place, but you might be lucky. Sitting on the top, a bit more down there, don't we? Right, and you are reasonably firm, so you can stay like that. So I can still see those roots, and I don't want to see them. That sounds daft. I want them underneath media, that's what I mean by I don't want to see them. If I can see them, they're a bit too high. So just add a little bit more. There we go, that's that one done. So 2 Oncidium types, 1 unknown, and 1 Miltonia Sunset. That's 2 plants in effect. They've both gone in a small to medium bark mix, Burnham's bark, whatever sort that is. I think it's Melrose, the type of bark, the company that make it, and that one didn't get any sponge rock, did it? Never mind. I mean, the fact that I haven't put any sponge rock in there, it's probably going to die within a week. What do you think? Right, so that's another 3 done. Update the notes, put the date repotted and details of what they got potted in and details of how good or bad the roots were. And in this case, all 3 roots were good. Those were good root systems, so quite pleased with that. And then there's still some in there in pots that I know about, but I can't do. And every now and again I'll spot another one and I'll sort of look at it and think, media's starting to look a bit soggy. Let's have a closer look, which is what happened with these 3. The challenge plant, the sort of zygo looking one, I've been waiting for the blooms to finish with the hope that some new roots would grow, and it's obviously one of those that as the blooms fade it triggers the root growth at the base. So even though that's on a growth that's actually quite mature and bloomed, but the roots are starting now. So good, right, I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.